202. The first order of business here is to approve the agenda. Are there any amendments, additions to the agenda? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. Next is the approval of the October 24th Audit Committee minutes. Are there any amendments to the October minutes? Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. The first order of business is the risk assessment and audit plan for 2024. And Matt, LaTour, go ahead and take it.
And Mr. Chair, members of the committee, so thanks you all for joining us today. Today is the annual meeting where we go through the more detailed risk assessment process and ask you for approval of our audit plan. So I'm going to walk through a presentation. This usually takes me a while just to talk through it, but I'm going to try to shorten it today and just go a little bit more high level because I think it's a lot of the same risks you're hearing about year over year. This committee is getting to be more experienced, so I don't think I need to go into all the detail here, but please stop me and ask questions, or if you have other thoughts on risk to the council, I'm happy to hear that as part of the discussion too. Then we'll walk through our proposed audit plan for next year. I've got a few questions committee members submitted in advance, so I'll talk through those, including committee member Jorgensen, who's not here today. So I'll address those, and then we'll ask for approval, and then get to the next item. So in terms of the general risk environment, as always, we looked at equity at the council, and I should actually back up a second. So the way we do this, we do about 50 interviews with staff from around the council, senior leaders typically. We ask them questions about the risks that they see. We talk about financial risks, staffing issues, anything in their department that they view as a potential risk to council. We compile those into a sort of one little spreadsheet that we use to assess and evaluate a number of factors. It creates a numerical spreadsheet that I always say is more art than science. I mean, I think this is an exercise with the staff that we have, and the level of necessity here is to get a ballpark and get a sense of what we think are going to be good areas to target for our audit work. And so what I'll talk through is some of the things we heard, some things we know about as we track throughout the year. Some of us in the team go to a lot of meetings throughout the year, senior level staff meetings, executive team meetings, listen to council meetings, everything else. So this is kind of a short compilation of risks, not meant to be fully intensive, but certainly, at least one analysis. So first is equity at the council, and I think as all the council members know, this is a top conversation at most of your meetings. A lot of programs focused on ensuring equity in all different program areas, financially, procurement, staffing, et cetera. It continues to be a focus of the council. I won't go through all the programs that we have or all the challenges we have, but an area that we ask questions about, focus on, and have some of our audit work focused on. I should mention here too is when we do the analysis we had a couple years ago, a special indicator within our spreadsheet that focuses just on equity risk. Another area is climate change. I think this is a topic obviously that we all know well, that given our business lines, environmental services, transit, where we have infrastructure in the state, in the city, in the region, certainly is going to pose risks in the short and long term. We're already seeing effects of high intensity weather. Transit infrastructure, I would think of Hurricane Sandy 10 years ago, they're still dealing with issues in the New York region from that weather event. So something to be thinking about as we go forward. Asset management, this is an area that we've had a number of reports in this space over time. There's a major initiative at the council right now through our Business Process and Systems Improvement, BPSI program. And there's one project specifically focused on asset management and developing a solution to ensure that our assets are managed across the council. We're thinking about life cycles, thinking about replacement costs over time. And then, as you've heard in this committee, just thinking of some of the details about how we're doing materials management and other things. So, certainly helps with fraud risk, but, an area that, and there's also federal compliance hooks here with FTA. They're asking us to be focused in part because of what happened to Hurricane Sandy, thinking about what our life cycle of our assets are and how we're going to replace those assets. I have a line for state government. This was a very active legislative session. I don't need to tell the people at this table that. That comes with opportunity, that also comes with risk. So we have new money that we have to account for and think about how we're going to spend. We also have a number of initiatives that were required by the legislature, just a few administrative citations, the TRIP program, which is an enforcement. We just passed a code of conduct last week. Free fare pilots. There was a lot of requirements of the council within the last legislative session. I would say this is an area that I think we still don't even entirely have a grasp on just in the first year or 6 months it's been, how this is going to affect our risk profile going forward. So that's something that we'll have to continue to monitor and think about. And I know a lot of staff and senior leaders of the council are focused on this, and as well as council members. From an economic standpoint, I think overall, as we get towards the end of the year, it feels like we're actually approaching what may be a soft landing in terms of the broader economy. The inflation in the Twin Cities, as I've heard, is one of the lowest in the nation, but there still is challenges with increased costs. I think while staffing has improved, and I'm going to talk a little about staffing in a minute, there's still challenges there in some job classes. And so we're continuing to work through, especially with our operator ranks and other positions, police officers, and other professionals, trying to continue to fill and make sure that we have a sustainable level of staff for the future. And also starting to think about, as I mentioned, with the risks of new money and having $6 billion worth of capital projects, that really changes the profile of the council in terms of what we're going to look like in 5 to 10 years, in terms of the number of operators we need, more electric fleet, more police officers, more security. All of that has tails down to other departments at a time when, at least right now, we're still kind of recovering from very low unemployment, and a lot of necessity to train staff. So I know there's a lot of efforts, just even in recent months, to really think about what that looks like and how to start approaching those challenges from a staffing perspective. Cybersecurity, this was ranked, one of the things we looked at was the Institute of Internal Auditors has a survey of all chief audit executives about risk profiles across all sectors across the world. Cybersecurity is ranked as the #1 risk by chief audit executives. We're going to hear more later, the last item in the session, about our current posturing, so I won't go too far into this right now, but certainly one that we want to highlight in our report is something we're thinking about, knowing we need to react to. So I've mentioned this before to this committee. The yellow lines here are just, this is the high-level org chart, and the yellow lines are positions just in the last 6 months to a year have turned over. Phil's here, and he's either on that list or those people report to him most part. I don't know how many interviews you've done this year, Phil. I've been in a lot with you.
Quite a few.
I'll say that it's definitely a risk when you have turnover. I think that and we'll continue to sort of track through, but also this flip side of risk is always opportunity, and having new fresh leaders to take a new perspective and look at things. But just to name a few, we just announced the new regional administrator last week. The chief financial officer is still working at interviews. We have a new chief human resources officer, director of real estate, risk management, and the CIO. And that's just the high level. This is a list, and I won't go into detail on this, but this is just an IT. And just go back 30 seconds to what I said about cybersecurity. Not that this is all cybersecurity related, but it's a lot of turnover in a space that's highly critical for the council. And this is just some of the Metro Transit turnover we've had. And that's just leadership. Then you get in, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, bus operators, some of our critical frontline employees across the council that are challenging to fill and maintain workforce, and will continue to be. I've mentioned to this group before that we use as one of our tools what's called the CSAT tool. It's a control environment assessment that the state uses. We just use it in internal audit. We ask a few questions about it through the process. It is just generally to get a high level of the control environment, and we have for a couple of years now just identified a few areas. Again, not comprehensive nor definitive, but some areas that we think are important to think about at a high level of council, a lens we use to do our risk assessment process. So creating, maintaining asset inventory, which I mentioned a few minutes ago, developing, documenting, implementing, and monitoring internal controls. From my own observations of the council, what we used to say a lot is write it down, write it down, write it down. You just had a lot of activities that people did that they maybe didn't document what they were doing, or what they were doing even. I think we're getting better with that. What we're starting to focus on now is the why. So what are you doing this for? What's the purpose of the activity you're doing? Where is it being documented? What are you controlling for? What's the risk you're avoiding with this activity you're doing? So trying to get to that to hopefully streamline a little bit of our work, maybe create some efficiencies, or at least develop a better set of internal controls. Strategic planning documents we've done with Thrive, we've division level strategic plans. We have a council strategic plan that we submit to the governor's office. I think what this is really reflecting is tying some of those activities together and socializing them with staff to ensure that we're connecting all of the work and the whys to our strategic planning documents. So pockets of this all over, but thinking about whether it's really kind of streamlined, strategic in the way it's aligned. And this, I think the fourth one gets to cybersecurity, a piece of it, and the Data Practices Act. I think this is just generally in where we store our data, are we appropriately tagging it as public and non-public, secure employment data, is it connected, is it secure, do we have user administration accounts, ensuring that it's protected the way it needs to be. So just a short list of things from the internal control environment. Any questions on the risk profile or any comments from committee members before I get into the audit plan?
Any questions for that?
You don't have to have any.
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
The key vacancies in 2023, so the chart that you have in here, so those are positions that were open sometime during 2023. Maybe I missed it, but is there, as of December, do you know what percentages are filled?
So regional administrator is filled, deputy regional administrator is filled. The CFO, I think there's been rounds of interviews that have happened, so that is likely on its way. And Phil can jump in here if he wants to on any of these, but Chief Human Resources Officer was filled in September, real estate was filled this fall. I don't know if I know the date on that one. Kelly was summer. Risk was fall.
Yeah.
CIO, I think.
That has been filled, and we can talk about it later on in the agenda.
Yes, that will be in it. So,
Great.
And General Manager Leslie Canderas, that was a few months ago. So largely we're filled. So these are all positions that happen open.
So that's the good news.
That is the good news. I think I said opportunity and new people. That's what I meant, was that we have a lot of these. We've kind of turned the corner on a lot of this.
Yeah.
But it's been.
I mean, that still creates an incredible challenge for the organization, with all those new individuals.
And most of these have had a gap, where there's been, people filling in positions and acting in more than one role. So,
Thank you, I appreciate it.
yeah, that's a good question. Glad I could clarify that. Okay. All right, so we will go first. This is work that we're continuing to work on. I'll make a few notes here. So body-worn cameras, we were continuing work. And I know one of the questions I got from the committee member who wasn't here is, has anything sort of held you back this year? This is an area we're working with the PD about how we're going to access the data, and there are some sensitivities there because it's a law enforcement system. So we're sort of carefully working through those issues with the PD. So we really haven't been working on this for a little while. We've been working through the issues. So we did a lot of work on it this year, but haven't finished because of that. Just make that note. The cash remove is something we're working on. The cash remove has not happened. It was delayed by about 6 months from when we planned it. So that's another one that we've kind of done in fits and starts this year. We're largely complete with that work. Just kind of formulating some ideas we have for recommendations going forward based on both our observations during the move and of the new space, and even some things that we heard from some of the finance people. So talk about that, probably that'll be first quarter next year. MCUB, we're really just starting with the risk assessment process. I know there's some other work in this space that is going on with OEO and some outside work. So what we're doing right now is just evaluating how that relates with anything, and is there any gaps. And typically with outside work, they're more high level and we're more in the weeds in the internal control. So I think we'll probably have very different focuses of our work, but still working through that. Fuel management, we're in process. IDASH is a human resources system, Metro Transit use, we're in process there. Customer complaints, Metro Transit, we're just getting started there. The contract administration, I'll make a note here that probably a little bit inconsistent here, but I've done both with contract administration. In the last year or two, we tried just having a big bucket of audits that all fell under that, but I don't know if I think it's been challenging then to count how that work finishes. So I'm kind of doing both now, where it's like there's a bucket, and sometimes, so the audiovisual contract is one where we're reacting to some information we received from elsewhere. And it's, I think, just reacting and wanting to do some audit work to make sure that we're doing all the right things on contract administration in that space. So this is something I'm adding, we're already working on. It wasn't on the plan, it was kind of in that contract administration bucket, but I really would like to just separate these out and be a little more clearer, make these distinct audit pieces so when they come to you, they'll make more sense as distinct pieces. So we're working on the audiovisual contract, we're continuing to work on change orders, expect to wrap that up from our end in Q1, and I'll talk a little bit about more detail on that in a minute. And then we are finishing up a stockroom audit. We went to a few stockrooms and have some observations there. So that's work that we're doing right now. A lot of it is sort of in the, a lot of what's on here is actually in early phases, some wrapping up. All right, so the next 6 months, I had a question about the bank account reconciliation. So this has been, the state auditor had a finding on this this year. It's been a kind of a lingering issue of trying to figure out why our GL and our bank accounts don't exactly line up, and we've been trying to figure out why for a while. And I think there's been a lot of work that RA Finance has been doing this year. We're still working through kind of what the right audit target is here. Is it more detailed, like going through transaction, or is it a higher level, thinking about what the control is that we're doing here and the activities. And so I have a star here. What the star is a co-sourced work. So we have, right now, we're still, as we're working through this, we haven't fully decided what the scope is. Once we do that, then we'll evaluate whether it's something we can do with our staff, whether it's something we would use help with. And I think I can say now that we have a contractor. We're just about to do a notice to proceed with a construction audit-focused contractor that has a wide range of experience with FTA and some local construction projects, and they have some CPAs on staff. So we'll see if they might be able to help us here. Otherwise, we might look at, we're currently doing an evaluation of what MCUB vendors are out there that do accounting work, that we could do an MCUB select and do a discrete work where they could come in and help us either at that high level or at that detailed level, or both. So still kind of trying to evaluate where to go with this. Critical issue and something we really need to resolve, and also just kind of hoping, working with the finance staff, I think that ideally it'll kind of work through where the control would fit the best here. We're finishing stockrooms. This is really something we kind of do at a rolling basis, so we'll probably do more work in the stockroom area next year. So that's why you're seeing it both in the ongoing and in the next 6 months. It's something we roll. Regional administration accounts payable, we've done a lot of work in this space, in the vendor file, paper checks, some other audits. So we continue to maintain this on the audit plan and would like to go through and kind of risk assess where we've already been here and what additional work we can do to add value. Hiring, recruiting, workforce planning, that's a big bucket, but critical. And again, I think it's, Cassandra Tabor is now on board as the new Chief HR Officer. I know that there's some thoughts to kind of reevaluate how they're going about hiring practices. But still, whether there's space for us to jump in and do some targeted audits. So we'll probably do the risk assessment here in the first 6 months and then figure out where that would leave us in terms of what will make the biggest value add for an audit. Metro Transit Facilities, asset management, again, kind of looking at, this is really, I think, gonna be focused, depending on the risk assessment, on, how we're responding to, especially like our stations, broken glass kind of things. What's the process, how are we at managing those assets? So it's asset management, a little more targeted, but a little bit of flexibility too in terms of what we look at there. We have new fare boxes. We used to do a lot more fare box work. We've done less of that in the last 3 to 5 years, but I think with the new fare boxes, it'd be a good time to get in. There's been a little bit more variance and, variances we can't explain with the fare boxes, not drastic, I'm talking a little bit over $100 here, but probably worth getting some attention on, what we're doing there. Occupational health has been some, I think, just long-standing questions about disability management and process. There's actually a lot there we can look at. So again, this would be kind of one to get in, do the risk assessment, and figure out where our best targeted work is. MCES, Environmental Services, Incident Management Governance. So this is actually something that some of the senior leaders in Environmental Services actually asked us to do. And I think relevant, they have some systems that they report anomalies, can be fraud, can be broken things, and they do a root cause analysis, and we were just looking for a refresh and thought it would be good to have an independent eye on that. Council use of state contracts. We do a lot of our purchasing through state contracts, and part of this is because we were looking at the audiovisual, which is a state contract, and made us think maybe we should be looking at all state contracts. So again, kind of the contract administration bucket of things that we've been working on for a couple of years now. Take that playbook and use that just specifically with some of our state contracts, a sample of them. Physical facility security. I think just cash room work has started to generate some ideas here about the things that we might want to look at a broader lens. Nothing specific yet, but thinking about just facilities. We've done work in Metro Transit before on this topic, so thinking about some other facilities, maybe getting back into the Metro Transit part. Risk management process review. This is something that I've talked to Phil about for years, about looking at their process, kind of mapping out internal controls. This might be kind of more like a consultation of looking at the process, kind of identifying what they are doing, and then kind of asking that why. What are we doing here? What are we doing here? Where is that documented? What's the criteria? And then non-revenue vehicle management, which is something we've done before, but we're due for another bite at the apple there. So, any questions on the 6-month plan? And maybe I'll make one more point. I don't have all of the work that the consultant will do, because the first thing I'm going to ask them to do is do a risk assessment of the capital projects themselves. We'll inform that with the work we've already done, and then we'll decide with the consultant what might be the best way to approach both in the short and long term. So if you think about like a blue line type project, there's a cycle of audits that you could do just as planned. Like we know that we're going to do at these phases, we're going to do this work, and then so we'll build that out more as a specific project-based plan. So it's not reflected in here. I expect the risk assessment will take a little bit of time when we come back, probably in either the spring meeting or the summer meeting, which we typically have you amend the plan for any changes. At that time, we'll add all of that to the plan, so it'll be specifically laid out in here. So I should have mentioned that first, please.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question is on the council's use of state contracts. So we do some of that through transportation, especially for our small bus procurements. Is it more looking at the process that we do that for, or like we just went out for a new contract for small buses that were outside of the state contract because we were having delays? And so what's the goal of that? Are we doing it right, or should we be doing that when we start looking at other options?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, both, I would say. I think it's, there are, state contracts often have, and one of the issues that we've heard is that state contracts have already baked in provisions. So if it's federal, we're supposed to have the federal clauses in there. Are we doing that? Are we ensuring that we're touching our bases there? I know that I hear a lot that it's just sometimes it's path of least resistance to get things done. It can make things more efficient. So none of the work would imply that we're going to try to get entirely away from doing that necessarily, right? It's just trying to make sure that we're contract administration lens, are we setting up the contract and executing it the way that we need to? Are we doing all the work to, it still doesn't mean that we shouldn't necessarily be going out and getting bids. So, a little bit of both.
Any other questions?
I just have a comment. I'm sitting here thinking back to when I was first asked if I would serve on this committee, and all I could think of was, what are those people thinking about pointing me to audits? Because my first reaction to audits was the IRS. I only had one experience with them, and it had a very happy ending for me. But I remember thinking, why would they ever put me on audits? And when I got a better explanation as to what the committee did, I was like, yes. Because as a former elementary teacher, unforeseen consequences were always my anxiety point. I mean, I was always worried about what's going to happen to a child. And when I think about what I value, and I think we value throughout our government systems, but certainly here at the Met Council, is protecting our assets. And I think our most important asset is public trust. And what I really like about what you've presented and what I've learned in the short period of time that I've been on this committee is just how much public trust is baked into the work that's being done. So to everybody who does this work, I just want to say thanks, because I've learned so much, but I really appreciate this from a council member perspective. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember, yeah, I think we all have that same reaction we had up in audit.
Yeah.
It's like not everybody's like, first thing they think about when they graduate college is like, I want to be an auditor. And like, somehow you end up here, and but I will say I appreciate your comments. Now nobody can say anything bad about this plan because you weighed in. But,
I didn't mean to do that. If you have something bad to say, go
no,
ahead.
I think it's it's always interesting work, and I think I appreciate the comments, the team too. I think that we're always trying to tell them, that this work is valuable and it's important, and it's a big part of governance in terms of like how we're managing the organization. So.
Yeah.
Question?
Can you remember, Councilman?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Lee, Director LaTour. Maybe I'm jumping ahead in your presentation a little bit, but I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more on your plan to cover some of the IT risks and potentially, bringing in outside contractors, et cetera, given the turnover that you've had in some of those unique areas.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Committee Member Galswick, we're going to talk about that a lot later.
Okay.
I think it's a really important question. You probably don't see as much, as I highlight cybersecurity, there isn't as much here, right? I appreciate that. We'll talk about that a little bit more in terms of what our posture is, appropriately. Yeah, and then we'll kind of discuss what our plan is going forward there. We are thinking about it though.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Any other questions from me?
Just a comment,
Yeah, go ahead.
Chair Lee. So happy to see the box there in the upper right-hand corner, given the risks that you were describing that the council faces. And I'm sure you're still working on exactly, how you're going to approach that. I'd be really interested, just for personal reasons too, to see how internal audit can help in that space. But something to consider, not to make the scope broader, but I guess it would be a little bit, would be to also include retention efforts. And in that bucket as a whole.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that comment. I think it's an important piece of workforce. So we'll definitely, I see the team nodding behind you, so we'll take that into account when we do the risk assessment.
Oh, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, thank you. In addition to that, I think, and you, maybe it was your intent to include this, but also kind of the retirement planning. We know who our most senior employees are, who are getting close to that retirement point, and they may choose to go early or stay longer, but to the extent that that can be a part of that retention process, I think it's important.
Okay. All right, so just a couple other things, our kind of out bucket are things that we've heard about, we think are important. you know, and one of Committee Member Jorgensen's comments is, and I appreciate this comment, that we often have a probably more ambitious plan than we ever can get to. And I would say there is some design to that because risks change throughout the year, and sometimes it's just, you know, other initiatives get going and it's, you know, is this the right time for this? We like to have options. I mean, you know, we like to have some choices. So there's probably some truth to like in that we'll probably get to, you know, half to 3/4 of this. Some of it will push. You know, and I recognize that that's a little bit maybe like intellectually dishonest, but I also, that is why I think we've found it to be useful to have, okay, what's next? We've got a team that's available and ready. What do we think is peaking right now? That's the right place to jump into. So these are some other things. You know, the Northstar is something we do every year, so that's just on there because of that. Cloud computing, we've been moving to the cloud continuously. That's something we've identified. I think to Committee Member Galsman's point, identifying the right resources to do that audit is still something we have to work through and what the focus would be. But definitely something that's I think of interest and high risk. eBuilder is our system we use to manage our capital projects. And I know OLA commented on just some of the challenges they had with navigating that system from an audit perspective. So thinking about whether it's, one, it's configured, and two, it's doing the job of ensuring that we're keeping records that are able to be audited. Metro Transit disciplinary reporting is a key component of our equity evaluations from the FTA. Payroll process review, this is more just something we're probably due to get back to, more than anything else. HRA payments review, we had a recent audit. I think there's been some attention here, but just an area that we haven't focused on for a while, so it's something we really want to get into. Environmental services, the HS waiver program controls. Private data systems, this is sort of a broad, you know, continuation of, we've done user administration, we've made recommendations at a high level of user administration. We continue within like our IDASH audit, we're looking at user administration, but thinking forward, we want to be getting at some of these other systems like PeopleSoft and revisiting it, other systems that contain key data and making sure that we're role-based access and using best practices to protect the data, as I mentioned, in that control environment, ensuring that we're restricting access to those things. And technology, infrastructure, and adoption, it's a pretty broad topic, but something we're consciously doing down the road. Some other things, this is a lot of the same thing. We are allotting time for follow-up as we've been reporting to you. Ethics compliance improvement, that's Julia from our team has been working on a process across teams to look at our ethics point solution and make improvements and reporting. Sounds like we may have a roundtable on that this year, local governments, so that'd be of interest for us. Enterprise risk implementation, something that we're working on across council, contributing to. External audits continue to track, I'll mention that in a few minutes. There's always 5 or 6 of those. Our triennial will start about now next year. We get the request for information usually at the tail end of the year before it's due, so that's usually November or December, when we do coming up. Continuous improvement, our strategic planning process. We always have, I think we did 6 investigations this year. I'll talk about that in a minute, but planning a little bit of time for that. And we're due for our quality assurance review. So it's been 5 years. So we'll plan for that this year too. And I think we're likely going to go just get a consultant to do it rather than get a peer review like we did last time. I think that's where I'm leaning, but if I think the other chief audit executives, if you had experience in recent years and have suggestions there, I'd be willing to listen and take your advice. So. Just a reminder and just how this has flowed. I did an executive team presentation on November 9th. Hard to believe that was already a month and a half ago. We had executives review this. We sent out a draft to you all back in November, maybe early December. Final review and drafting in the last couple of weeks, and then we are today for your approval for this round.
Questions or comments from me? Go ahead, Councilmember Buffer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have one question and, well, maybe 2 questions. So on the e-builder system, we just had a motion to expand it over to MTS. It could potentially make a lot of sense to couple that activity of them using the e-builder system for their projects, so that we, you know, because you can start clean instead of going backwards, and then figure out best practices as it kind of gets onboarded into their projects. That makes a lot of sense.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I know Sue's here. Did you just worked on that business item too, right? So
I did,
where,
yes. And I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear the question. Are you saying to use best practices because we're gonna bring MTS?
Because as you're starting clean, instead of like looking backwards at projects and other systems used, you know, use that to kind of define the best practices.
And actually, in fact, we just met this morning with Transit, ES, and MTS about e-builder to talk about, you know, having MTS sort of on a fresh start. And so they can learn a lot from what ES and Transit has done. So we are looking at that.
Perfect. One other program that you might want to look at that I don't know that we delayed this about, that is the new program that we just approved, the Metro Move, where it's tying in. So it's a program that's using, it's a very unique program. It's like kind of we're setting an example in the nation where we're connecting like medical assistance rights and funding and VHS funding with for some of our Metro Mobility customers. And so it's a different source of funding coming in. So I think it'd be good to, you know, I think it's something people will question if we don't have that kind of in our audit portfolio, I guess, is what I'm saying,
I will.
in a long-winded way.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, we'll take that note, and I think we can consider putting it on the next iteration of this, because I think as I mentioned, we've got our next 6 months plate full, but very good idea for down the road. So.
And it's not completely started, so it's good timing, but just to put it on your radar.
Okay, very good.
Any other questions or comments? Go ahead.
Just a brief comment. Thank you, Chair Lee. Director LaTour, we're going to talk about this more offline. So we're preparing for our QAR at the University of Minnesota Quality Assessment Review as well. And just as a note, and maybe this is already on your radar, but you'll want to make sure to have it completed by December 31st, or otherwise you have to comply with the new standards, which have not been published yet.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to comply with something you don't know what they're going to be. So that's currently, the current plan is for that to be available January 7th, and then the new requirements will be in place January 7th, 2025. So when you're thinking about the timing of it, just to make sure you're getting it done before then.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, we did look at the exposure draft of those. We're starting to think about it for sure, but it's a good note to make sure that we get this done. I think we finished last time, you know, in the spring, so we were going to be a little bit over 5 years by the time we wrap this up, but it'll be within a month or two. So. Committee Member Jorgensen submitted some questions and just asked about our budget. So we're slated next year for about $1.6 million. I think that's adequate. I will just make a comment on that. We've grown our staff since I've been here from probably about 7 to fully staffed will be at about 12, and we have a new senior auditor coming on board, and I'm kind of giving my director's report, but in early January we just promoted Brandon Barshfield to auditor. It shows starting a new position early January. We'll have one more position open, then we'd be fully staffed internally. And our co-sourcing budget has increased we added $500,000 through a budget amendment, specifically for the construction auditing. We've always carried a co-sourcing budget primarily for investigations, but there was some slack there we could use for things like IT if we needed to throughout the year, or accounting. So I think we're good. I think we'll have to really consider in January when we start our budget process for 25, thinking about, we've really expanded our use of co-sourcing in the last couple of years, at least the way we're thinking about this, which I think is beneficial for an organization that has as much capital projects, shifting needs. It really makes a lot of sense to carry a good staff that knows the organization, but also have those resources available outside and use both to be the most efficient. So that's really where the strategy is going. And I think at this point we're well-resourced or adequately resourced. I'll have to do the math on Committee Member Jorgensen's assessment of $500,000 to $750,000 for every $1 billion in revenue. So think about whether we're in alignment there, but I think we probably are about. So with that, I will. Is there any more questions?
Yeah, any more questions or comments, Mike? This is our loan business item, so I do need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the item passes. For our reports, the next two reports, the director's report kind of leads into the annual report, and so Matt will go through one right after that.
Side note to our technician, you can leave the same slideshow up. It's all in the same deck. It's like magic, isn't it? Maybe it's on. Oh yeah, it is. Okay, so I'm just going to go through what kind of an update. We're calling this our annual report, just to wrap up 2023. Talk a little bit about performances here. So, so on our completed list, and I kind of just went through this, but this is some of the work that we either completed or, as I mentioned before, we're really in the final phases and we expect to finish. We're really just kind of wrapping up on finding sheets and management responses on. So contract administration, which counts several different products that we issued throughout the year, and work that continues. IT change management, you'll hear about IT LifeCycle management later today. Grants management, job classification, council agreements with MnDOT, which is a little bit like the contract admin, unemployment insurance, the police inventory, Northstar, and the Metro Transit cash move. So I'd say that we feel like we made very good progress towards our audit plan this year. I think we had a couple of, as I mentioned, like with body cams, getting access to data, the delay of the cash move. We also did some work for MTS, some inventory work that ended up taking quite a bit of hours for our staff to go out to a number of different sites. So there's some impediments to just getting through some of the work this year that probably led to not quite getting to completion. We also had some staff turnover with Kevin Ely leaving the council a few months ago, so that delayed us a little bit on one of the audits. But I feel pretty good about what we accomplished this year in terms of the work we did finish. I mentioned external audits, so we spent time with the state auditor, obviously every year. Legislative auditor at times was the person to my right, can attest to this. We spent quite a bit of time working through some comments early in the year with legislative auditor and continue to work with the legislative auditor on the Green Line extension, light rail project, financial audit that continues and will continue into the next year, and an audit, a pretty significant audit of the Metro Mobility program that will extend into next year. FTA came out for a drug and alcohol audit. HUD was here doing some audit work. MPCA, we actually engaged with environmental services about, we hadn't done this as much in the past, but just being aware of and attending some of the site visits that MPCA is doing at facilities, and so a couple of us spent some time just going out, walking through with the external MPCA staff with what they were doing. Really, I think it was this benefit just for visibility, for awareness of what types of compliance issues that ES is dealing with, and just getting to know some of the staff. So that was, I think, really positive. And then we're just notified of the Minnesota Department of Revenue audit that's just getting started right now. With our ethics and compliance responsibilities, we're just about finished with the fraud awareness training. This will be an online resource for staff that will roll out next year. It's about a 30-minute training. Went through all the aspects of fraud awareness. We worked on, as I mentioned before, ethics point continuous improvement. A lot of, I think, good progress there in terms of working with OEO and HR for the other teams that use ethics point, and really kind of working through the back end of how we're case managing and documenting our processes and trying to be consistent with how we're using certain fields that will really help with reporting. Our team processed or touched about 25 complaints in ethics point. Out of that, there were 6 fairly significant investigations that we worked on. And as I've mentioned before to this group, 3 spin-off audits that we also sometimes the best response to a complaint can be doing some audit work to make sure our controls are in place to remediate the problem. And then, we're working through our strategic plan implementation. I think we'll have more to say about that. Julia worked through, she finished the PMDP project this year, which is our internal PMP program, and she developed a strategy for how we're going to implement our strategic plan. So I don't know what to say about that today, but we can come back in next year and really kind of do a touch point of where we are with implementation. I think we've made some good progress there. So.
I have a question, Chair
Yeah,
Lee.
quick.
Matt, of the ethics and compliance work, about what percentage or how many FTE do you think you dedicate to that bucket of work?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I would say it's, well, it's actually a useful slide. It's up here. So if you look at this slide, what this is showing is the time we spend within our coding on various things. You can see investigations is relatively low. I know that we've talked about, we put a lot of this in administration. I would say that we probably really don't devote more than, because we co-source the investigations, we don't, probably, I would say maybe a half of our time, like two of us, like between us, it's almost like a half an FTE maybe, like 25% of mine and Julia's time. Looking at Julia, maybe, yeah. So we don't really have dedicated resources to this, we sort of just manage it through co-sourcing and.
But even the fraud training that you're rolling out, that's still, you're getting all of that done. That was in that previous slide in that bucket.
We worked with HR to do that, so they did, it was a lot of HR doing some work, us feeding them, because we actually developed slides for our new manager orientation during the pandemic when we shifted everything from in-person to online. So we had a base of slides to work with. We updated a lot of things based on ACFE, just new data, new insight they had. It was kind of a back and forth, and really HR, learning on development staff did a lot of the legwork for us. So it was a lot of it would come to us for review. Okay. We provide some feedback and send it back, then it would come back in a month. We kind of did a process for that.
Sounds like a great model. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
So I'll just speak more to this slide. So this is the first full year we have this data about how we're spending our time. So, obviously we're spending about 50% of our time on audit work. I think that's probably a pretty decent ratio for a first year. The admin time is something that I know that I've talked to my managers about. Let's unpack that a little bit and see, is there some, I think, work we're doing in admin that we could make its own job code and count it separately that reflects that this isn't just us sitting around twiddling our thumbs. It's definitely not. It's we need to do a little bit better job parsing that out. And you can see that really it trumps everything else. I mean, risk assessment is probably the next biggest thing. I think these bars look really small compared to everything else, even if they're relatively big efforts, it feels like. Risk assessment was a pretty big item. Training, our team is, we've really, our strategy is to recruit smart people with critical thinking skills and train them how to be auditors, not necessarily rely on going out and finding auditors, through our recruitment process that are, multiple years experience. And that's really worked for us, I think, fairly well. So that means we have to spend a little bit more on training, time and money. And then you can see the rest of the things that we do. Advisory activities is another one that we get a lot of questions. We get people asking, what's your opinion on this or that? So we'll do some research and send back a memo or something like that.
Question on that, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Matt, so in administration, do you include your PTO hours? Are they in there? Or have they been taken out? Because that can get a little misleading too.
Mr. Chair, members, Brenda does my work on this, so.
Oh.
Thank you, Chair Lee, members of the committee. For all the data you're going to see here on time cards, I've removed all PTO. So this is just actual working time. And then for some later graphs where it might show the way we're spending time across different divisions, that also excludes admin time. So that is only going to be actual project-based time.
Thank you.
You'll see those in other, I don't think I have any of the detailed breakouts. I think in October we went through a lot of that already, so yeah. I really kept this relatively high level, but thanks, Brendan, for the clarification there.
Thanks, Brandon.
Just a simple, you know, I'm not gonna go through a lot of detail on this today. We'll talk a little more about follow-up in the next meeting. This is just, in terms of kind of output, like consistent level of recommendations over time by year. So this is just showing that, you know, and you can have a report that's got a lot of recommendations that maybe are low impact, and you can have a report like you'll see today where there's one that's really high impact if it's implemented. So this is just one way of looking at it, not the sole way, as I know my other chief auditor executives know, that there's multiple ways of looking at this, but just to show that. Looking at follow-up over time, I think I showed this, it's an executive team, maybe I showed this slide, but there's overlap in these pie charts. On the right-hand side is more current recommendations, and the green are still open. So if you look from right to left, as you go back in time, the left-hand side, you'll see about 77% of our recommendations issued 2 and 3 years ago are closed, whereas in more recent years, we have about 72%. So this is just showing that over time we are working towards closure of most of our recommendations. I know that in the executive team, when I showed this slide, it generated a very long discussion about, you know, we talked about risk acceptance, we talked about enterprise risk management, and we talked about the impact of having open audit recommendations. So I think the benefit of that, this is the same slide I showed, you know, just to show that we're bringing this internal to executive leadership to make sure that we're starting to think about how to develop and how to ensure that if we get to that point of risk acceptance, that we're doing it in a formal way, right? With the right people involved. This is our visibility. I've talked about this before. This is just the metric of, you know, how much time we're spending getting out. This is supposed to be outside of audit work. It's just go to an event. We did here's us in a whole bunch of different scenarios. It's me and Nick behind a rail operator riding out to the Mall of America. I think this is really bad. We can see almost everybody. I'm almost positive that one at the bottom is me, and I'm sure that I don't have some of the things logged as visibility hours that I probably should have. So I'll take that one. But pretty much everybody did this year. I think it was highly beneficial. I think we got a lot of good feedback from divisional staff that it's great to see your people out, to interact with the operators. I think they appreciated seeing us out there. Sometimes people don't even know we exist, or they think we work for the feds, or they, you know, so it's
The IRS.
the IRS. So I really think this has been highly beneficial. I think our staff has thought so. So just wanted to report out on that. So that's all I have. I think I mentioned our new staff coming in. I think I covered everything I was going to cover in the director's report too. So with that, I'll take any final questions, then I can stop talking for a little bit.
Questions, comments?
Thank you, Chairman. Director LaTour, so thinking about follow-up, I like having the stat of just where we're at by year, but separately I know that there are scheduled or planned implementation dates that are provided by management, and I remember some of those are pretty extended, you know, specifically in the world of technology where oftentimes this is a multi-year process. So have you looked at doing any metrics compared to where they are versus when they were expected to have it implemented?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, that's a good suggestion, and I'm looking at Brenna because I think we can probably bake that into our Power BI presentation. We may take some tweaks to the database.
Yes, so committee member Gillespie, chairman, members of the committee, in the database that the recommendation status tracker is based off of, currently we have a recommendation due date field, but there's not necessarily an easy way to connect it so that, let's say for example, a status would automatically change from open not due to open due and not implemented or something like that. There are ways that we can track. I was actually chatting with Julie about this earlier today, about, okay, we have these recommendations that the database still might have listed as open not due because that field is manual entry, but hey, we've actually passed the due date. So we're looking at ways to start tracking that, and I've been working with some people in IS to improve the accessibility of that tracker with our managers so we can continue improving our view of it.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to say thank you to your team for going out and doing things like Right Day in Transit. That is, for those who don't know, it's taking the people on staff who are maybe not out on the transit system, but going out on the transit system and interacting with operators and customers and all of that. And I'm just very happy to see that, you know, having people from regional administration go participate in that, I think helps build those connections between Robert Street and Metro Transit, because they have different physical locations. So I think it's really important to have your faces out there, and I think it's much appreciated, so thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, just one last point, appreciate the comment. We're gonna be reaching out for a workshop of this group in the spring. I think we've been trying to schedule that for a while now. This is gonna be a good opportunity to kind of like go into some of the detail about, you know, what are the expectations of you all in terms of like how we should be, like, what do you want to see really? And like, you know, because I think we're making some attempts at what to show you every day of it, every meeting, but you know, are there more in depth and follow-up? I know has been key, but like, you know, I'd be interested in hearing how others present their follow-up, different metrics, different ways of looking at it. Certainly would be open to those suggestions, so a good format for that.
Any other questions, final questions or comments for me? We'll move on.
Yep.
The third item is technology lifecycle management. We have Julie and Aimee.
Greg can go to the next report.
Yeah, Greg, you can just hold on, sorry. Yeah, and well, Aimee has a seat, so I'm gonna just give a little preamble. I guess you all thought you were done with me, but I have to give a little setup for this. So this is an audit that
Aimee?
that Kevin Ely started before he left the council mid-year. And so we started this audit with probably ambitions to test and look at 5 or 6 asset classes. But with the change in staffing, we decided to just, when Kevin announced he was gonna leave, we just had him kind of wrap up what he'd already done and write a draft. LifeCycle management. And package report. So in just the last few months, the rest of us have just been trying to package this up, work with management to get a response. So I think that's what's reflected here. And Amy's going to talk through a little bit about what the work was and the report and the findings. But I just wanted to give a little context for kind of where we were with this one. Why it's we've been done with this for a bit, but it's just coming now. So.
Awesome, thank you. Chair Lee, members of the committee, hi, my name is Aimee Gillespie. I'm an associate auditor. I worked with Kevin Ely on this project. Like Matt mentioned earlier, he was the lead auditor and I provided some supportive auditing services, I guess, over the summer, and so I'll be presenting this. But we have IT lifecycle management. A little bit of background about this audit. Technology asset lifecycle management. A technology asset is the information, hardware, or software used by an organization to carry out business objectives and activities. The lifecycle management process is a process of managing the entire lifecycle of an asset from its inception, development, service, up until the disposal of the asset. So for objectives of this audit, they were to evaluate the council's controls for lifecycle planning, managing, and disposal of technology assets and applications, to evaluate the council's control activities regarding technology asset management, given the absence of a policy or procedure that is specific to the structure of lifecycle management activities at the council. And then to review the council's adherence to ISACA's COVID-19 framework, which we did end up using for criteria for this audit. So the scope of this audit was asset and application lifecycle management activities from January 1st through December 31st, 2022. And we reviewed all available lifecycle management documents, processes, and tools. So specifically, we reviewed programmable logic controllers, or PLCs, managed by Environmental Services and Metro Transit, as well as fair equipment. We interviewed IS and division staff, including Metro Transit and Environmental Services involved in asset management, in addition to reviewing the relevant documents, processes, etc. All right, so for criteria, again, given that the council does not have a specific policy or procedure dedicated to technology asset lifecycle management, we did decide to use ISACA's COVID-19 framework, and you can see here in the visual, COVID has 4 relevant domains related to each phase of the lifecycle management process. All right, so from this audit, we issued one observation or one finding, which is that processes are inconsistent and frequently inadequate for technology asset lifecycle management. Divisions generally lack automated tracking tools for all phases of lifecycle management. Maintenance metrics are often used instead of lifecycle metrics. This is a problem because general maintenance doesn't often capture true efficiency or effectiveness for assets. Currently, the council has no policies or procedures that require the use of industry best practices for lifecycle management. The risk that creates is that assets might not be serviced or replaced promptly or proactively. Metro Transit and Environmental Services both do their best to extend the life of an asset, mostly to save money. However, without adequate metrics, we might not be able to properly budget for or plan servicing and replacing these assets. Without adequate metrics, the council may not be able to measure asset efficiency against organizational objectives. So finally, in conclusion, best practices in technology lifecycle management can help the council lower costs and maximize the value of technology. It can help ensure resources for maintaining and replacing assets are recognized and planned for. And finally, lifecycle management processes can help organizations link technology to organizational goals and objectives.
Questions, comments for Aimee? Well, seeing none, Aimee, thank you for your presentation.
I think I get to stay up here for one more. Right. So this might look familiar.
Oh, yeah, Northstar incident
So
control.
Greg, now we'll meet the Northstar presentation.
So Chair Lee, members of the committee, for the next presentation, it's Northstar Commuter Rail, which I presented on last year in February as well. This is an annual compliance audit that we do every year. The Northstar is a commuter rail that runs from Big Lake, which is near St. Cloud, all the way down to downtown Minneapolis. It runs twice a day. This is a really simple audit. The requirements each year, we review the internal control plan or the ICP. We verify that commuter or employee injuries were reported accurately if they did happen. And then we verify that any rail accidents were also reported correctly. And the results that were that there were no changes to the internal control plan or the ICP. All injuries and accidents were reported correctly, and no findings were issued. So this was a simple one. Can I answer any questions about that as well?
Any questions or comments for Aimee? Go ahead, Member Gillespie.
Thank you, Chair Lee. More of a clarification on the reason for doing this audit. So the reason, and maybe we've talked about this before, but the reason why the Met Council is required to do this audit annually is for the Northstar rails because it's considered to be a railroad versus our other transit services. Is my understanding that correctly? So it falls under the statute. Is that the background on this?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, it's regulated by the FRA rather than
Got it.
the TA, and operated by BNSF. So there's an extra requirement, and they ask for some independence from the management team to do the audit. So it's something that we've just accommodated for as long as I've been here. Okay.
Any other questions or comments for Aimee? All right, thank you, Aimee. All right, we have 2 information items. The first one is just that our next scheduled audit committee meeting will be February 13th, 2024.
Yes, thank you.
And looking for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that this meeting be closed to the public pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 13D .05 Subdivision 3B so the committee can discuss data classified as not public.
Can I get a second?
Second?
Thank you. All right, all those in favor say aye.
I
Any opposed? All right, we will be entering closed session, and we will not be coming back to the regular meeting. And so, so the regular business has been concluded. And then, what else we should be?
Take some of